I was being ignored at my ex's wedding until a Mafia boss said, "Act like you're with me." If you're ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's jump right into the story. The music was too loud. The laughter was too sharp. The champagne tasted like regret. I sat alone at table 12, the forgotten table, tucked near the kitchen doors where waiters rushed past without looking. My green satin dress clung to me like expensive armor, but it couldn't protect me from the truth. I was the ghost at this wedding. The woman Ryan almost married. The story everyone had already decided was over. Across the ballroom, my ex-fiancé leaned close to his new bride, whispering something that made her laugh. The sound cut through the air like glass. She was everything I wasn't: effortless, glowing, perfect. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never been left behind. No one spoke to me, not even out of politeness. A few guests glanced my way with pity before quickly looking elsewhere, as if heartbreak might be contagious. I pretended to scroll through my phone, my thumb moving over the same screen again and again, a desperate performance of being unbothered. When the music shifted to something slow and romantic, couples flooded the dance floor. My chest tightened. I could feel the whispers rising around me like smoke.
Poor thing.
Still single. Can you imagine? I needed air. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping too loudly against the polished floor. I didn't care. I walked quickly toward the terrace doors, my heels clicking against marble, my breath shallow and uneven. The night air hit my face like a reprieve.
Cool. Sharp.
Real. I exhaled slowly, gripping the stone railing. It's fine. You're happy for him. You're fine. But I wasn't. You're not very good at hiding it. I froze. The voice was low, rough, impossibly calm. I turned. A man stood in the shadows near the doorway, watching me with dark, unreadable eyes. Tattoos crawled up his throat like secrets that refused to stay buried. His suit was tailored to perfection, but there was something untamed about him, something that didn't belong at a wedding filled with polite smiles and champagne toasts. Joe Lord. I'd seen him once before, across a crowded restaurant. People had whispered his name like a curse they didn't want to speak too loudly. Rumors followed him like smoke. Half the city belonged to him, the other half feared him. And now he was looking at me. "I'm fine," I said quickly, straightening my shoulders. He tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth almost curving. "You're a terrible liar." I laughed, brittle, sharp. "Is that your business?" "Not yet," he said. Before I could respond, he stepped closer, the scent of smoke and expensive cologne catching in my throat. He nodded toward the ballroom behind us, where Ryan and his bride swayed together under the chandelier. "That him?" Joe asked. I looked away. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he said quietly. "Or you wouldn't be out here." I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stood there, exposed and exhausted. The music changed again, something slower, heavier. Through the glass doors, I saw Ryan glance toward the terrace. His eyes found mine. Then they slid to Joe. His expression shifted, surprise, then something sharper. Joe noticed. His jaw tightened slightly, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, more deliberate. "Come back inside with me."
Why?
I asked, my pulse spiking. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Because you deserve better than hiding out here while they pretend you don't exist." My throat tightened. I wanted to say no. I wanted to leave. But something about the way he looked at me, steady, certain, unbothered, made me hesitate. Joe extended his hand. Not a demand. An offer. "Act like you're with me," he murmured. I stared at his hand.
Broad. Inked.
Commanding. Then I looked back at the ballroom. At Ryan. At the whispers. At the life that had moved on without me. I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and certain, and the world shifted. As we walked back inside together, every head turned. The whispers stopped. Ryan's smile faltered. His bride's eyes widened. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel invisible. Joe leaned close as we crossed the threshold, his voice brushing against my ear. Let them see what he threw away. His hand was still holding mine when we stepped back into the ballroom. The warmth of it, steady, unflinching, felt like the only real thing in a room full of performances. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know who Joe Lord really was or why he'd chosen to stand beside me. But as every eye in that room turned toward us, I made a choice. I stopped caring about the answers. A slow song began to play. Something old, something tender. The kind of song that made everyone else disappear into their partner's arms.
Joe didn't ask.
He just guided me toward the center of the dance floor, his movements deliberate, unhurried. The crowd parted like water. My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't think this is a good idea, I whispered. He glanced down at me, his dark eyes unreadable. You've been having bad ideas all night. Let's try a better one. Before I could protest, his hand found my waist. His other hand still held mine, firm and warm. I felt exposed under the chandelier lights, under the weight of 100 stares. I can't do this, I said, my voice barely audible. Breathe, he said softly. Let them see what he threw away. Something about the way he said it, not mocking, not pitying, just matter of fact, made me believe him.
So I did.
I breathed. And then we danced. It wasn't graceful. I stumbled almost immediately, my heel catching on the hem of my dress. Joe chuckled, a low, genuine sound that surprised me. Told you I was bad at this. I muttered, embarrassed. Good, he said. I don't need perfect. I just need you to stay with me.
So I did.
We swayed together, imperfect and human, while the rest of the room watched. His hand on my waist was steady, grounding me when I felt like I might drift away. He didn't spin me dramatically or dip me for show. He just held me like I mattered. And for the first time all night, I laughed. Really laughed. It bubbled up unexpectedly when he nearly stepped on my foot, catching himself at the last second with a muttered curse under his breath. You weren't kidding, I said, grinning despite myself. I'm a man of my word, he replied, and the corner of his mouth curved. Just barely, but it was there. Across the floor, I caught Ryan's eyes. He stood frozen near the edge of the crowd, his new wife beside him. Her smile had faltered. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. He looked jealous, hurt, confused, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet, unexpected peace. Joe must have noticed because he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur only I could hear. You look beautiful tonight. He's an idiot. The words hit me harder than they should have. My throat tightened, emotion rising so fast I couldn't name it. It wasn't relief or gratitude. It was something deeper, something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in years. I looked up at him, searching his face for insincerity, for the punchline. But there was none. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. Because you deserve better than hiding, he said simply. The song ended too soon. The music faded, replaced by polite applause. We stopped moving, but neither of us let go immediately. Finally, Joe stepped back, his hand slipping from my waist but lingering for just a moment. Thank you for the dance, he said, his tone formal now distant. I nodded, unsure of what to say. But he didn't leave. For the rest of the evening he stayed close, never intrusive, never demanding, just there. A shadow at my shoulder. When guests glanced my way with curiosity instead of pity, he was the reason. When Ryan tried to approach me near the bar, Joe simply appeared, and Ryan walked away. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His presence was a statement. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, I gathered my clutch and headed toward the exit. Joe fell into step beside me, silent as always. Outside, beneath the glow of string lights and the distant hum of the city, he stopped. Wait, he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black card. No logo. No company name. Just a phone number embossed in silver. He pressed it into my palm, his fingers brushing mine for just a second. If you ever need to be seen again, he said quietly, call me. I stared at the card, then at him. Why would you want me to? He didn't answer. He just looked at me for a long moment, then turned and walked toward a black car idling at the curb. I stood there alone, the card warm in my hand, watching his taillights disappear into the night. When I finally made it to my own car, I slid into the driver's seat and sat in the silence. The card rested on the dashboard, stark against the pale leather. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, smudged mascara, tired eyes, green satin wrinkled at the waist. And beside my reflection, on the passenger seat, a half-empty champagne flute I'd carried out without realizing. I picked it up, watched the liquid shimmer under the streetlights, then set it down and looked at the card again. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. You okay? That was unexpected. I didn't reply. Instead, I tucked Joe Lord's card into my purse, started the engine, and drove home, feeling, for the first time in months, like maybe I wasn't disappearing after all. I woke up to sunlight slicing through my blinds like an accusation. My head didn't hurt from champagne. I'd barely touched the glass. It hurt from memory. From replaying the same moments over and over until they blurred together into something I couldn't quite trust. Joe's hand on my waist. His voice, low and steady. Let them see what he threw away. The way the entire ballroom had gone silent when we stepped onto that dance floor. Ryan's face, frozen, disbelieving. I rolled over, burying my face in my pillow. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of something I didn't understand. It was just pity, I told myself.
A show.
He felt sorry for you. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true.
Pity didn't look like that. Pity didn't feel like that.
My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, I grabbed it. 3 missed calls from my mother. 2 texts from my sister. A message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. And 1 from Ryan. I stared at his name on the screen, my stomach twisting. For a moment, I considered deleting it without reading. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won. That stunt last night was low, Tash. I read it twice. 3 times. Waiting for the shame to hit, for the instinct to apologize, to explain, to make myself smaller, so he'd feel bigger. It didn't come. Instead, I locked my phone and set it face down on the bed. For once, I didn't feel ashamed. I got up, made coffee, and tried to pretend the world hadn't shifted overnight. But an hour later, my mother called again, and this time I answered. Tasha Marie Glines, you have some explaining to do. I winced. Full name. Never good. Hi, Mom. Don't hi, Mommy. Who was that man you were dancing with last night? I leaned against the kitchen counter, cradling my coffee mug. Just someone I met at the wedding. Just someone? Her voice pitched higher. Tasha, everyone is talking about it. Linda saw you 2 together and said he looked like, well, she said he looked dangerous. And your Aunt Carol swears she's seen him in the papers. Mom. I closed my eyes. It was just a dance. It didn't look like just a dance. She wasn't wrong. We talked for another 10 minutes, her probing, me deflecting, until I finally convinced her I was fine and hung up. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. Because everyone had noticed. My mother. My aunt. Linda from book club. Ryan. The whole room had watched me, and for once, I hadn't disappeared into the background. I walked back to my bedroom, my eyes landing on the black card sitting on my dresser. It looked almost ominous in the daylight, stark, minimal, expensive. Just a phone number embossed in silver against matte black. No name. No company. No explanation. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. If you ever need to be seen again, call me. I shouldn't call. I knew that. Joe Lord wasn't the kind of man you called on a whim. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind who made rooms go quiet when he entered them. But I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he'd looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. Like I was something worth paying attention to. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. It rang once,
Twice.
3 times. No answer. I hung up quickly, my heart pounding. Stupid. What were you even going to say? I tossed the card back onto the dresser and spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself. I cleaned the apartment, binged a show I'd already seen, scrolled mindlessly through my phone. But I kept glancing at the dresser. By the time the sun set and the apartment filled with shadows, I'd almost convinced myself it was better this way.
Safer.
Simpler. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. My breath caught as I opened the message. Didn't expect to hear from you this soon. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. It was him. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. My hands trembled as I typed back, deleting and rewriting 3 times before finally settling on something simple. I wasn't sure you'd answer. The reply came almost immediately. I always answer. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone warm in my hands, my heart stuttering in my chest. Another message appeared.
How are you?
Such a simple question.
So ordinary.
But coming from him, it felt like something more, like he was asking what I hadn't said, what I'd been trying not to feel. I typed slowly, carefully. Better than I was last night. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again.
Good.
You deserve better than that. I didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know what to do with the way his words settled into the hollow spaces inside me. So I just sat there, staring at the screen, watching the shadows lengthen across my floor. Finally, I typed one more thing. Thank you. For last night. His response was almost immediate. Don't thank me yet. I frowned, unsure what he meant. Another message followed before I could ask. Can I see you again? My heart stopped. Started again.
Stuttered.
I stared at those 5 words for a long time, feeling the weight of them, the danger of them. I should have said no. Should have deleted the number, thrown away the card, pretended last night had never happened. Instead, I typed 3 letters that changed everything.
Yes.
The rooftop bar sat 20 stories above the city, wrapped in glass and golden light. I arrived 10 minutes early, which gave me just enough time to second-guess everything. What was I doing here? Meeting a man I barely knew in a place that screamed money and danger. A man whose last name people whispered like a warning. I should have stayed home. But then I saw him. Joe stood near the edge of the terrace, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city skyline. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. No suit tonight. No armor. Just him. He turned when I approached, and something in his expression shifted, softened. Maybe. He didn't smile, but his eyes held mine in a way that made my breath catch. You came, he said quietly. You sound surprised. I am. He gestured to a small table tucked away from the crowd.
Come on.
I got us a spot. We sat, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed below us. Cars, voices, life moving forward while we sat suspended above it all. A waiter appeared with 2 glasses of wine. I hadn't ordered yet, but Joe nodded his thanks, and the man disappeared. You ordered for me? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I took a guess. He slid the glass toward me. If I'm wrong, order something else. I took a sip. It was perfect, dry, crisp, exactly what I would have chosen. Lucky guess, I murmured. Maybe. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. We fell into conversation slowly, carefully. I told him about the wedding, about sitting at that forgotten table, about watching Ryan marry someone who looked like an upgraded version of me. I felt invisible. I admitted, the words coming easier than I expected. Like I'd been erased from my own story. Joe watched me, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back, his voice low and deliberate. You let people make you small because you think you owe them softness. I blinked, caught off guard. What? You apologize for taking up space, for having feelings, for existing in a way that makes other people uncomfortable. He paused, his dark eyes steady on mine. You don't owe anyone that, Tasha. The way he said my name, like it meant something, made my chest tighten. That's easy for you to say, I replied, trying to keep my voice light. You're you. People don't make you feel small. No, he agreed. They're too afraid. There was no arrogance in it. Just truth. We talked for another hour about art, about the city, about nothing and everything. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers, his attention so complete it was almost unnerving. At some point, I found myself relaxing, the tension in my shoulders finally easing. So, I said, swirling the last of my wine, are the rumors true? Which ones? Any of them. All of them. I tilted my head, studying him. People say you're dangerous. He didn't flinch. I am. They say you own half the city. I do business in it. There's a difference. They say. Rumors are just stories told by people too scared to ask questions, he interrupted, his lips curving into something that almost resembled a smile. You're asking. That's different. Maybe I'm not scared of you. Maybe you should be. But he said it gently, almost like a warning wrapped in concern. The night deepened around us, the city lights flickering like scattered stars. Eventually, he glanced at his watch and stood. It's late. I'll walk you to your car. You don't have to. I know. We rode the elevator down in comfortable silence. Outside, the air was cool, the street quieter now. My car sat in the parking garage across the street, and Joe walked beside me without hesitation. When we reached it, he opened the door for me, an old-fashioned gesture that felt absurdly out of place coming from a man like him. But somehow it fit. I slid into the driver's seat, and he rested his hand on the top of the door, looking down at me. Thank you, I said. For tonight. Don't thank me yet. That's same line from before. We're just getting started. My heart did something complicated in my chest, half hope, half terror. He stepped back, closing the door gently. I started the engine, then rolled down the window. Joe! He leaned down slightly, his eyes meeting mine. I want to see you again, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. And I hate that I want that. He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Good, he said finally. That means you're paying attention. Then he straightened, tapped the roof of my car twice, and walked away. I sat there for a moment, watching him disappear into the shadows, before finally pulling out of the garage. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was smiling, really smiling, the kind that came from somewhere deep and real, the kind I hadn't felt in months. And for the first time since Ryan left, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what might be waiting ahead. Something shifted after that night. I started painting again. Not the careful, perfectionist work I used to force myself through, but messy, honest things, bold strokes in colors I'd forgotten I loved. My apartment smelled like turpentine and coffee, and I didn't care that I got paint on my favorite jeans. I slept better. Woke up without the weight of dread pressing on my chest. I laughed at stupid commercials, and my neighbors' terrible jokes, at things I used to let pass by unnoticed. I felt like myself again. Or maybe like someone new. Someone I was just beginning to meet.
But I also thought about him.
Too much. Too often. Joe's voice would surface at random moments, low, steady, certain. The way he'd looked at me across that table, like he could see every scar I'd tried to hide and wasn't afraid of any of them. It should have scared me. Instead, it pulled me under like a tide I couldn't fight. The text started a few days after our rooftop meeting. Late at night, when the city was quiet and sleep felt too far away. The first one came at 1:47 a.m. You awake? I stared at my phone in the dark, my heart doing something complicated. Unfortunately, his response came quickly. Can't sleep either. We didn't talk about anything important that night. Just small things, what we were reading, what kept us up, the way the city sounded different at this hour. But it felt intimate anyway, like we were sharing something no one else could see. It became a pattern. Short texts that said more than they should. One night, somewhere around 2 a.m., I typed something I'd been wondering for days. Do you ever regret helping me? The three dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. I held my breath, wondering if I'd crossed some invisible line. Finally, his response came. I don't do things I regret. I read it 3 times, my throat tight. Not even dangerous things? Especially not those. I smiled in the darkness of my bedroom. Alone, but not lonely. We started meeting more often. Quiet dinners at places tucked away from crowds. Long walks through parts of the city I'd never explored. Coffee at odd hours when neither of us could sleep. He talked in pieces, never giving me everything, but offering enough that I started to see the shape of him. He told me about loyalty, about the people who'd stood by him when the world turned dark, about the ones who hadn't. His voice went flat when he mentioned betrayal, like the memory had left a permanent mark. You don't forget that, he said one night over wine. When someone shows you who they really are. No, I agreed quietly. You don't. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt exposed in the best and worst way. You're starting to understand, he said. I learned that he valued silence, not the awkward kind, but the comfortable kind that came from not needing to fill every space with noise. That he noticed things other people missed. That beneath all the rumors and reputation, he was loyal to a fault, protective in ways that bordered on dangerous. And I learned that he was watching me just as closely as I was watching him. One evening, we sat at a small Italian place I'd never heard of, one of his regular spots, apparently. The owner greeted him by name, didn't ask what he wanted, just brought food and wine, and disappeared with a knowing nod. Do you always get special treatment? I asked, amused. Usually. He didn't look apologetic about it. We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, I mentioned feeling stronger lately, more like myself. You did that, I said. That night at the wedding. You reminded me I was still here. Joe shook his head slowly. I don't save people, Tasha. I just remind them they can fight. Same thing. No, he said firmly. It's not. Saving someone means they owe you. Reminding them they're strong means they owe themselves. I didn't know what to say to that. He reached across the table then, just once, just briefly, and touched my hand. His fingers were warm, rough, certain. The contact lasted maybe 3 seconds before he pulled away, but I felt it long after. Felt it in the car on the way home. Felt it when I unlocked my apartment door. Felt it when I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my hand still warm where his had been. I was falling. I knew it with a clarity that terrified me. Falling for a man who lived in shadows, who spoke in half-truths, whose world was built on things I didn't fully understand. A man who looked at me like I was something rare and breakable and worth protecting, but also like I was his. I picked up my phone, the screen glowing in the dark. Still awake? His response came within seconds. Always. You okay? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed the truth. I'm scared.
3 dots. A pause.
Of me? Of how much I'm not scared of you. The pause lasted longer this time. Long enough that I wondered if I'd said too much. Then, finally, good. That means you're seeing me clearly. I didn't reply.
Didn't know how.
But I fell asleep that night with my phone still in my hand, his words glowing softly in the darkness. The whispers started small. A coworker's glance lingering too long. My mother's friend at the grocery store, eyes narrowed with curiosity. Someone at the coffee shop I frequented, watching me over the rim of their cup. Then the rumors got louder. I heard she's seeing Joe Lord. That Joe Lord? No way. Yes way. My cousin saw them at Marcello's last week. I pretended not to hear. Pretended it didn't bother me. But the truth was, it felt like being watched through a microscope, every move scrutinized, every choice questioned. I was at my desk when Ryan showed up. I didn't see him coming. One moment I was reviewing a client file, the next he was standing in front of my desk, arms crossed, jaw tight. Tasha. I looked up slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Ryan, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. I'm working. This can't wait. He glanced around the office, then lowered his voice. What the hell are you doing with Joe Lord? My stomach dropped, but I kept my face blank. That's none of your business. It is when you're making a fool of yourself. He leaned closer, his voice sharp with something that might have been concern but felt more like possession. Do you even know who he is? What he does? Yes. I didn't. Then you know you're chasing power. Trying to make me jealous. It's pathetic, Tash. Something cold settled in my chest. You need to leave. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for your help. I stood, meeting his eyes. You don't get to do this. You don't get to leave me, marry someone else, and then show up here acting like you still have a say in my life. His face flushed. This isn't about us. This is about you throwing yourself at a dangerous man because you're hurt. Get out, Ryan. Tasha.
Now.
He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away, muttering something I didn't care to hear. I sat back down, my hands shaking, adrenaline coursing through me. Around the office, people were trying not to stare. I ignored them, focusing on my screen until the words blurred together. I stayed late to avoid the looks, to let the office empty before I had to face anyone. By the time I finally packed up, it was nearly 8 o'clock and the building was almost deserted. I stepped outside into the cool evening air and froze. Joe was leaning against the wall near the entrance, hands in his pockets, his expression calm. But his eyes weren't calm. They were dark, focused, and absolutely furious. Joe. My voice came out smaller than I intended. What are you doing here? Heard you had a visitor today. My stomach twisted. How did you people talk? He pushed off the wall, moving toward me with controlled, deliberate steps. What did he want? It doesn't matter. It does to me. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. What did he say? I hesitated, then sighed. That I'm chasing power. That I'm making a fool of myself with you. Something dangerous flickered across Joe's face, a hardness I hadn't seen before, steel beneath the surface that reminded me exactly who he was. You don't owe that man another second, he said quietly, each word precise and sharp. Not your time. Not your energy. Not your explanations. Nothing. I know that. Do you? He studied me, and for a moment, I saw the quiet threat in his eyes, not directed at me, but at anyone who dared hurt me. Because from where I'm standing, you're still letting him get to you. He showed up at my work, Joe. What was I supposed to do? Call me. His voice softened slightly, but the intensity remained. Next time you call me. I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't need protecting. But standing there in the dim light, looking up at a man who radiated controlled danger, I realized something unexpected. I felt safe. Not afraid. Not intimidated. Safe. My world eats people like you, Tasha. His voice dropped lower, almost gentle. Soft people. Good people. You should stay away from the noise. I held his gaze, my heart pounding. Then I said the words I'd been afraid to speak out loud. Then maybe I'm done being small. He went completely still. For the first time since I'd met him, Joe Lord looked unsure. His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for the fear he expected to find. But I didn't look away. You don't know what you're saying, he said finally. Yes, I do. Tasha. I spent years making myself smaller, so Ryan would feel bigger. Apologizing for existing, for wanting things, for taking up space. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. I'm not doing that anymore. Not with you. Not with anyone. He stared at me, jaw tight, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. You should be scared of me, he said quietly. I know, but you're not.
No.
He exhaled slowly, his hand coming up to touch my face. Just once, his thumb brushing my cheek so gently it made my breath catch. You're going to ruin me, he murmured. Or you'll ruin me. Maybe we'll ruin each other. The words hung between us, heavy with truth and promise. Then he stepped back, his hand falling away.
Come on.
I'll follow you home. You don't have to. I know. He looked at me steadily. I'm doing it anyway. And he did. It was past midnight when the pounding started. I was in my pajamas, halfway through a cup of chamomile tea, trying to convince myself I'd sleep tonight. Then, Bang, 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 fists against my apartment door, aggressive and unrelenting. My heart jumped into my throat. Tasha. Ryan's voice, slurred and rough. Open the door. I know you're in there. I froze, tea forgotten in my hand. Tasha, please. We need to talk. He sounded drunk.
Desperate.
I'd heard that tone before. Back when we were together. Back when he'd had too much whiskey and wanted to rehash old arguments at 2 a.m. I should have called the police. Should have stayed quiet until he left. Instead, I walked to the door, keeping the chain locked, and opened it just a crack. Ryan stood in the hallway, disheveled and reeking of alcohol. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shirt untucked, his hair a mess. What do you want? I kept my voice steady. I want to talk. He leaned against the doorframe. Too close. About him. About what you're doing. Go home, Ryan. You're making a mistake. His voice rose.
He's using you, Tash.
Can't you see that? Guys like him don't. I'm not doing this. I moved to close the door. His hand shot out, catching it. Don't walk away from me. Let go. Not until you listen.
Let go. He didn't.
Then a voice came from behind him, low, cold, and absolutely final. She asked you to leave. Ryan spun around, nearly losing his balance. Joe stood at the end of the hallway, perfectly still, hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't yelling, wasn't posturing. He didn't need to. The silence around him was louder than any threat. Ryan straightened, trying to pull himself together. This is between me and her. No, Joe said quietly. It's not. Who the hell do you think you are? Joe didn't answer. He just stared, dark eyes unblinking, expression carved from stone. The kind of stare that made it very clear what would happen if Ryan didn't walk away. I watched Ryan's face change, watched the bravado drain out of him, replaced by something that looked like fear. This isn't over, Ryan muttered, but his voice wavered. Joe tilted his head slightly.
Yes.
It is. Ryan glanced at me one last time, then stumbled down the hallway toward the stairs. We listened to his footsteps fade, then disappear entirely. Only then did Joe move. He crossed to me in 3 strides, his eyes scanning my face. You okay? I nodded, my hands trembling. How did you? I was downstairs. He glanced toward the door. Pack a bag. You're not staying here tonight. Joe. Tasha. His voice softened, but the command remained. Please. I didn't argue. 20 minutes later, I was in his car, the city lights blurring past my window. He drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, jaw tight. Thank you, I said quietly. He shook his head. Don't thank me. But I don't do rescues. He glanced at me briefly, something fierce and possessive in his eyes. I protect what's mine. The words landed like a punch to the chest. What's mine? I should have been angry. Should have told him I wasn't anyone's property. But instead, my breath caught, and something warm and terrifying unfurled in my chest. We didn't go to my place. We went to his. His apartment was high up, 30th floor, maybe higher. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights scattered like fallen stars. Everything was clean, minimal, expensive. It looked like him, controlled, careful, revealing nothing. He poured us both whiskey without asking, and we stood by the windows in silence, the city sprawling beneath us. Why me? I asked finally, the question I'd been carrying for weeks. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable.
What?
Why me, Joe? I held his gaze. You could have anyone. Why someone like me? He was quiet for a long moment, turning his glass slowly in his hands. Because you don't flinch, he said finally. Everyone else does. That's it. That's everything. He set his glass down, stepping closer. You look at me and see me. Not the rumors. Not the reputation. Just me. My throat tightened. I'm not sure what I see. Yes, you are. His hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw. You see exactly who I am. And you're still here. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe you're brave. We stood there, inches apart, the city humming below us. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I stopped breathing. I shouldn't want this, he murmured, his voice rough. Want what? You. The word hung between us, raw and honest. Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft or tentative. It was inevitable, like gravity, like falling, like everything I'd been running toward without knowing it. His hand slid into my hair, pulling me closer, and I let him. Let myself dissolve into the heat and hunger of it, into the way he kissed me like I was something he'd been searching for and finally found. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and shaken, his forehead rested against mine. This changes everything, he whispered. I know, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I stood there in his arms, surrounded by glass and city lights and the dangerous calm of a man who'd just claimed me as his. And for the first time in my life, danger felt like peace. The weeks that followed felt like learning a new language, one spoken in silences and stolen glances, in the way Joe's hand would find mine under the table, in the rare smiles that transformed his entire face. We fell into a rhythm. Quiet dinners at his apartment, takeout containers scattered across his kitchen island. Long drives with no destination, just the two of us and the city lights. Mornings when I'd wake up in his bed, sunlight streaming through those massive windows, his arm heavy and warm across my waist. It should have been simple. It wasn't. Every moment felt charged, with risk, with restraint, with the knowledge that this thing between us existed on the edge of something dangerous. But I stayed anyway. One night, we sat on his balcony, the city spread out below us like a living map. He was quieter than usual, his whiskey untouched, his eyes distant. Tell me something true, I said softly. He glanced at me. About what? About you. The real you. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough. I had a brother once. Marco. He stared out at the skyline. He was the good one. The one who believed in people, who thought loyalty meant something. What happened? He trusted the wrong person. Joe's jaw tightened. Someone close to us. Someone we thought was family. I didn't push. Just waited. They sold him out. Set him up. He took a breath. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. Joe. I was 23. He was 25.
His voice went flat.
I found him in an alley downtown. They'd left him there like garbage. My chest ached. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it, his fingers closing around mine like a lifeline. After that, I stopped believing in good people, he said quietly. Stopped looking for them.
It was easier that way.
And now? He turned to look at me, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Then he walked in looking like proof that maybe I was wrong. The words settled between us, heavy and true. I'm not that good, I whispered. Yes, you are. He lifted our joined hands, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. You're so good it scares me. We stayed like that for a long time, the city breathing below us, the past sitting heavy on his shoulders. The intimacy between us deepened after that night. Not just physical, though that was there too, urgent and consuming, but something deeper. The kind of closeness that came from letting someone see your scars and trusting them not to run. But it was never easy. Every time I left his apartment, I felt the weight of his world pressing in. The looks from people who recognized me with him. The way conversations would stop when we entered a room. The careful distance he maintained in public, even as he held me close in private. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner where someone had stared at us the entire meal, I finally broke. I'm afraid, I admitted as we walked back to his car. He stopped, turning to face me. Of me. Of losing myself in this. In you. I looked up at him, my chest tight. Of becoming someone I don't recognize. He studied me for a long moment, then cupped my face in his hands. You found yourself the night you stopped caring who watched you dance, he said quietly. Don't forget that. But what if? What if nothing? His thumbs brushed my cheeks. You're not losing yourself, Tasha. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Someone who doesn't apologize for existing. Someone who takes up space and demands to be seen. Because of you.
No. He shook his head.
I just reminded you she was there. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that I wasn't dissolving into a shadow, that I was still myself. But standing there in his arms, feeling the way my heart beat in sync with his, I wasn't entirely sure where I ended and he began. Later that night, in the darkness of his bedroom, he pulled me close, his voice a whisper against my hair. I never wanted this, he said.
What?
To need someone.
He paused.
To need you. I turned in his arms, finding his eyes in the dim light. Is that so bad? It's terrifying. His hand traced patterns on my back. Because now I have something to lose. So, do I? I know. He kissed my forehead. That's what scares me most. I fell asleep that night tangled in his sheets, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. And somewhere between sleep and waking, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I loved him with a fierceness that felt like falling and flying at the same time. Loved him despite the danger, despite the shadows, despite every logical reason I should walk away. But lying there in the dark, listening to him breathe, another truth whispered through my mind, quieter, colder. I loved him, but I didn't know if I could survive him. The thought followed me into sleep, wrapping around my dreams like smoke. The conversation I'd been avoiding finally came on a Tuesday night. We were in his apartment, rain streaking down the windows, the city blurred and soft beyond the glass. Joe sat across from me, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. I want you to move in, he said quietly. I'd known it was coming. Had felt it building in the way. He held me a little tighter, kept me a little closer, looked at me like he was afraid I might disappear. Joe, I can keep you safe here. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. No more late-night visits from your ex. No more whispers. You'd be protected. Taken care of. Protected from what? From everything. His eyes were dark, earnest. From anyone who wants to hurt you. From the noise, the judgment, all of it. I set down my wine glass, my heart heavy. That sounds like a cage. It's not. But something in his voice wavered. It's safety. For who? I asked softly. For me? Or for you? He didn't answer. I stood, walking to the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass. Behind me, I heard him move, felt him come to stand beside me. I love you, I said, the words finally spoken aloud. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then stay. His voice was rough. Let me protect you. I don't want to be protected, Joe. I turned to face him. I don't want to disappear into your shadow, into your world. I don't want to become someone who exists only in relation to you. Pain flashed across his face. That's not what I'm asking. Isn't it? I stepped closer, placing my hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath my palm. You're offering me safety, permanence, a life where I don't have to worry about anything. But Joe, I don't want to hide behind you. I want to stand beside you. You think I see you as weak?
No.
I shook my head. I think you see me as something precious that needs protecting. And maybe I am. But I'm also strong. I'm also capable of fighting my own battles. I know that. Do you? I held his gaze. Because the woman you met at that wedding, she was broken.
Lost.
But I'm not her anymore. And you know why? He said nothing, just watched me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Because you didn't fix me, Joe. My voice broke slightly. You just reminded me I was never broken. His breath caught. For a long moment, he just stared at me, something raw and aching in his expression. Then he smiled, rare, quiet, devastating. Then I did something right, he murmured. I laughed, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. You did everything right. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest, his face buried in my hair. I'm afraid of losing you. You won't. I pressed closer. But you have to let me be myself. Even if that means I'm not always safe. Even if that means I make my own choices. Even if those choices don't include me. I pulled back to look at him. They do include you. Just not as my savior, as my equal, as my partner. Something shifted in his eyes. Understanding, maybe. Acceptance. I can do that, he said quietly. If you meet me halfway. Always. He kissed me then, soft and slow, like a promise we were both making. 3 months later, I found myself at another wedding. This time, it was my cousin's, a small affair in a garden venue, string lights and laughter and champagne that actually tasted good. I wore a blue dress this time, my hair loose around my shoulders, and I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt alive. Joe was across the garden, talking with someone I didn't recognize. He wore a dark suit, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed in a way he rarely did in public. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up. Our eyes met across the crowd. No performance this time. No pretending. No desperate need to prove anything to anyone. Just us. He nodded once, a small gesture, but I felt the pride in it, the steadiness, the way he saw me as I was and not as someone who needed saving. I smiled. Not the forced smile I'd worn at Ryan's wedding. Not the broken, fragile thing I'd been. But something real, something whole. A woman beside me asked if I was okay, and I laughed, wiping at my eyes. Yeah, I said. I really am. When the dancing started, Joe found me. He didn't say anything, just offered his hand. This time, when we danced, I didn't stumble.
Didn't need steadying.
I just moved with him, our steps falling into sync, the music wrapping around us. You look happy, he murmured. I am. Good. His hand tightened on my waist. You deserve to be. So do you. He smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that made my heart stutter, and pulled me closer. And as we swayed together under the lights, surrounded by laughter and music and life, I realized something. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not because Joe Lord had claimed me, or saved me, or given me permission to exist, but because I'd finally given myself permission to be seen. And that made all the difference.